My name is Daryl Carr. Thanks for making a date once again. We begin with the ITLOS ruling, and Tullow Oil says it expects some turnaround in its fortunes following the favorable ruling by the UN International Tribunal. The decision by the German-based ITLOS now allows Tullow to go ahead with new drilling activities on the 10 oil fields. Work on the fresh wells stalled because of an interim ruling by ITLOS to stop all activities until the final determination of the case. Last Saturday, the special chamber threw most of Ivory Coast's arguments out and made some modifications to Ghana's maritime boundary. There's more in this report.
According to Tullow, the projected improved fortunes will be based on them hitting their expected production target of 80,000 barrels of crude from the 10 oil fields and a positive investment reaction following the ruling, which would impact on earnings. Charles Darko is the managing director of Tullow.
Basically the ruling has come out today. The ruling leaves the line as determined by the chamber not affecting the 10 fields, and therefore we can see our way clear to continue with our operations. Obviously, we'll be in touch with the Ghana government in relation to the next major activities that we'll take up. We do have what it takes to go on the field. We are on the field today with our operations, but in any business, any different aspects of the activities require different consents and permits. And what we're saying is that the next step which we are going forward for, we will make sure we have all the necessary consents and permits of the government, and that essentially is a drilling exercise in respect of additional wells. So, for instance, EPA would have to be involved in that, things like that.
Tullow Oil is now planning to start fresh drillings on the country's second biggest oil field in the Tweniboa Enyira Ntom field by December this year. This would increase the total crude production from the country's oil fields by more than 30,000 barrels, a development that would help daily crude production reach 200,000 from next year.
Good news for Tullow, no doubt. How about the economy? Well, Petroleum Consultant Dr. Theo Echampong has outlined 4 key benefits that the ITLOS ruling will bring to the economy. He said the apprehension surrounding exploitation of petroleum resources as a result of the maritime dispute between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire will now be a thing of the past. He was sharing his thoughts in an interview with Joy Business.
One, there is certainty for us in terms of the maritime boundary and where that line should be. There was the debate between both sides on, one plotting a different line and us also coming to say, well, we have this agreement in there which, you need to respect. But with the court ruling, it really means for us that now we know where that line is, clearly should be defined. And that also then means, or leads to my second point, which then means that for the current offshore oil and gas blocks that we're exploring for, we get to keep all of those blocks. We do not lose any of them. And then number 3, it also then means that going forward, we're likely to solidify our upstream investment position. And so a lot of the international oil companies coming into the country now would not be feeling jittery on where the border should be, should they make a discovery. And so it means then that with the ongoing exploration efforts in that part of, the boundary, we should see more renewed investments coming in there. Again, remember that 2 years ago when the court made the provisional measures, they said that Tullow could not drill any new wells on 10. And so with this, it means that they can now resume drilling and then resume exploring for more oil and gas resources in that country. So all in all, it's quite good for the country.
Well, Dr. Echampong is also upbeat about the outcome of last Saturday's ruling by the German Special Chamber on Ghana and Ivory Coast maritime dispute. He says that it will have an impact on the delimitation of the country's boundary with Togo. He noted that Ghana must quickly take proactive steps to protect its eastern maritime boundary as well.
I think luckily now we have the Ghana Maritime Boundary Secretariat, and their scope and remit is to look at all boundaries, not necessarily just Cote d'Ivoire. And so what we have to do now, this started under the previous government, and I believe it's continuing under the new government, is resource that secretariat, get the right technical people in there, and then they will start, working and negotiating with the Togolese on our eastern maritime border, which is also not being defined. The good thing you can add is that with the Côte d'Ivoire Ghana determination, it does in a way strengthen our hands a little bit when we actually go there into these negotiations with the Togolese as well. But it's just really the government being proactive, and I suspect that they are doing that and getting the Togolese to sit on the table to delimit the eastern boundary as well before we see another court case on our hands. So we have a clearly defined international boundary between Ghana and Togo. And so that is not really the subject of dispute. The subject of dispute is the offshore boundary between those two countries.
We are turning to the mining sector, and government says there will not be an outright lift of the ban on illegal mining. According to the Deputy Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Barbara Oting JC, the ban would be fully lifted after a careful assessment of all small-scale mining firms in the country. She spoke to JoyNews at the inauguration of the new board of the Precious Minerals Company.
I think that the 6-month period that we initially stated is almost at an end, but the plans that we are putting in place to sanitize the sector, the projects that we are going to use to sanitize small-scale mining, the multilateral mining integrated projects, we are now going to launch the project documents and start implementing the various components of the projects. And it's going to be in phases. So we cannot lift the ban entirely immediately, but we are looking at allowing some operators. The Minerals Commission is doing an assessment. We are looking at allowing some operators to go back to work. So there will be a gradual process of lifting of the ban. Some sector will start, and later on others will follow. In every organization, the board plays a very important role because it is the board that drives the vision and the mission of the company, make sure that they comply with corporate governance, and also they achieve their targets that is set for the company to ensure that it achieves profitability. And I'm sure at the position that PMMC is now, the board has a Herculean task ahead of them to put in place the appropriate structures such that PMMC can be returned to a position of profitability. We also know that the small-scale mining, the ban on small-scale mining, has affected the operations of PMMC because most of their inputs comes from the small-scale mining sector. And because nothing is being produced, their operations have been hindered. But very soon, as we put in place structures for the industry to work again in even a better manner, PMMC's operations will also pick up and they'll achieve profitability again.
Now, the top winners of the CIMG Marketing Performance Awards are attributing their recognition to their commitment to building a strong brand. The award saw the MTN Chief Executive, Ebenezer Asante, pick up the Marketing Man of the Year award, while Managing Director of UBA, Abiola Bewa, pick up the Marketing Woman of the Year award. There's more in the following report.
The Chartered Institute of Marketing Ghana, CIMG Marketing Performance Awards, have become the reference points for recognizing various individuals and companies that have distinguished themselves in various areas. According to the MTN boss Ebenezer Asante, the award has come to him because of his commitment to build a strong telecoms brand.
This award is coming at a time we are doing everything possible to accomplish the mission that MCN stands for. We believe that every Ghanaian deserves the benefit of a connected life. So until and unless every single Ghanaian anywhere in this country attains that digital space, there is no way we can rest.
Managing Director of UBA, Abiola Bewa, on her part said teamwork got her the recognition.
Give the biggest appreciation to my team. I will always appreciate them because they were there for me and they bought into my vision. So we work together as a team, and I believe that this is what has brought us far. Another person I want to say thank you to is my chairman. He's been a source of inspiration to me, and they've given us, he and the board members have really given us a good direction. I believe that this is what has helped UBA Ghana to move this far.
Other winners for the night included EcoBank Ghana, emerging the CIMG Bank of the Year. Iswe Loans was adjudged the best finance house. Bond Savings and Loans took the Savings and Loans Company of the Year. George Ofosuhene is the Chief Executive of Bond Savings and Loans.
I think the main thing that we have done is to satisfy our customers. You know that the business that we do is we're in the service industry. In the service industry, your most important thing is to make sure that your customers are satisfied with what you are doing. We have been very innovative over the period, and we have made it a point that every single customer who comes through our doors will not leave dissatisfied. And continuously, we are looking for avenues to make our customers happy. What I would like to add is that, you know, these things do not come easy. Bond has a very, very solid team. It has come because the kind of people that we have within Bond are people who are self-motivated, people who are always, you know, looking for avenues to make sure that customers are satisfied.
Other award winners in the personalities category are Clifford Duke Metal, Director Marketing and Alternate Channels Unibank, who picked up Marketing Practitioner of the Year. Loloyon Nowosu, Marketing Student of the Year. Multimedia was awarded the Best Media Organization of the Year.
And way to go, Team Multimedia. Well, we are moving on to one of our top stories tonight. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has kept its policy rate unchanged. The central bank held the rate at 21%. Now, according to the governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, the decision was influenced by threats to economic stability and as well as the stability of the economy. The governor also commented on the public debts and what is being done.
Slower pace. Economic activity continues to improve, supported by higher oil production volumes, positive sentiments from businesses and consumers, improvement in electricity supply, uptake in private sector credit, and a number of government policies initiated to boost agriculture and manufacturing activities. All these point to positive growth prospects in the medium term. The fiscal consolidation process is broadly on course. Although expenditures remain within targets, the pace of spending picked up in June and July. The continued revenue underperformance could, however, pose some challenges to fiscal outlook. Headline and core inflation picked up in August, although inflation expectations declined. The committee noted that the uptick in core inflation, an indication of emerging pressures, would require further monitoring. Since August 2017, there have been upward adjustments in ex-pump petroleum prices, which are likely to transmit through prices in the coming months and pose some risks to the inflation outlook. These notwithstanding, the latest forecast show that the medium-term inflation target is achievable in 2018. This forecast is contingent on continued fiscal consolidation and exchange rate stability. The monetary policy stance has eased in line with declining inflation and underlying inflation pressures since the beginning of the year. At this MPC round, however, the committee decided it was time to pause the easing cycle in view of the emerging risks to the inflation outlook, while remaining vigilant and committed to respond and take the necessary policy actions should these initial signs of underlying pressures persist. Consequently, the committee decided to maintain the monetary policy rate at 21%. Thank you.
Well, the governor has also been speaking about the country's rising public debt.
Total expenditures, including arrears clearance, was 14.3% of GDP, below the budget estimate of 16%. Financing of the deficit, equivalent to 4% of GDP, was mostly from domestic sources. Total public debt stood at 138.6 billion, that is 68.6% of GDP as at the end of June, from 137.3 billion, that is 68% of GDP at the end of May 2017. Of the total, domestic debt remained unchanged at 63.9 billion, while external debt was 74.6 billion. The marginal increase in the debt stock in cedi terms was due to exchange rate effects. Global developments, coupled with continued improvement in the macro fundamentals, have impacted favorably on the country's external position. In the year to August 2017, the trade account showed that export earnings increased significantly by approximately 3 billion from last year on the back of increased production volumes in gold, cocoa, and crude oil. The recovery in exports, combined with an estimated 1 billion decline in imports, resulted in a trade surplus of 2.5% of GDP against a trade deficit of 4.3% recorded last year. These favorable developments would help build buffers against any unanticipated shocks. In the first half of 2017, provisional estimates of the balance of payments reflected significant improvements. The trade surplus translated into a favorable current account deficit of 109 million in the first half, compared with a deficit of 1.2 billion in the same period of 2016.
And that was the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Ernest Addison there. Let's turn to some other news tonight. Ghana's groundnut export potential could soon see a revamp with the introduction of a new variety resistant to poisonous substances known as aflatoxins. The variety, which is one of 4, was released in Kumasi this year by the CSIR Crops Research Institute. Kwesi Deborah reports.
Ghana is said to have made $2.4 billion from non-traditional exports, of which groundnuts accounted for $6.4 million in 2013. Government projects to earn $5 billion from the sector by 2019. Major impediment to this target, however, is a highly toxic substance known as aflatoxin, produced by fungus. The presence of aflatoxin in foods, and specifically groundnuts, is a serious threat to human health.
They cause stunting in children. They suppress the immune system of human beings, and even if people eat it, they can die from it.
Fungi and aflatoxin infection of crops occur during pre-harvest and post-harvest.
There's a project, Feed the Future, USAID Feed the Future project, which seeks to reduce aflatoxin contamination in our groundnut variety. The project has been running for 3 years now, and we are telling farmers how to reduce aflatoxin on the field, and especially after harvest, where we ask them to dry them on tarpaulins, but not on bare floors.
Though aggressive efforts have been made towards mitigating aflatoxin contamination, Ghana can't export groundnut to the EU due to the presence of unacceptable levels of aflatoxin.
Try to open gently.
The research center has been working to improve groundnut varieties for the past 8 years. Most of the groundnut varieties released in Ghana from 2000 to 2012 had good yield feature and also tolerant to rosette and other foliar diseases. Though varieties like Yenyawoso could mature within 85 to 90 days, other varieties become ready for harvest a bit later. Crops this year also takes 85 to 90 days to mature and can produce 2.9 tons per hectare.
One, the materials are early maturing, they are tolerant to diseases, and the yields are better than the local material from which we develop the new material out of them.
The other 3 new varieties are crops Pion, crops Nkatier, and crops Abeye, all of which take 90 to 95 days to mature. Together with this year, they are said to have high oil content and tolerant to groundnut rosette disease. For JoyNews, Kwesi Deborah.
We want to quickly turn to the stock market. Joining me in studio is Bertha Tibiga of Gold Coast Fund Management, which, by the way, won an award over the weekend. You won't tell us about that?
Yes, Gold Coast actually was given a special award at the Diamond Jubilee Business and Financial Services Excellence Award, and Gold Coast was awarded the Investment Bank of the Year.
A feather your cap. Well, let's turn to the markets now. How are we looking at? Let's look at what happened last week and what we are seeing happen today.
Okay, last week the market didn't do really well. If you look at even the volumes and then the major indices on the stock market, we saw a decline in all. The composite index and financial stock index went down by 1.11% and 1.59% respectively. And then we also saw that these indices close at 35.67% and then 29.33%. And if you remember, by end of first half, the stock market average returns had closed the first half at over 40%. And from first half till now, we're seeing impressive results. But for the past 2 weeks, we haven't seen that very impressive results, and that has actually affected. We've seen a lot of equities shedding off some gains and then some value on the market, and we've seen that affect the major indices on the stock market, especially the financial stock index, which is now 29.33%. That was as of Friday. And let me just bring this in. What's happening is that we expect this trend to actually continue in the short term on the stock market, that the major indices going down and some equities losing on their share value or share prices on the stock market. And this is because this is actually as a result of the normal demand and supply that we have on the stock market. But one factor that is also coming in is we're drawing nearer to the Christmas season, so we usually see investors selling off to have some more liquid.
I was wondering how much of an impact the previous events that we've seen, how much of that is contributing to this, but you're telling us that it's normal.
Yes, it's normal. It's the normal demand and supply on the stock market. What will happen is when these equities that are listed begin to release their financials, and we see very impressive results, which we are expecting from some equities, we could see them pick up on the market again. That's the normal cycle that we usually see. But the stock market is not a short-term investment instrument. It's actually long-term. But within the short term, you can make very good gains. For instance, somewhere last week, if you were an investor and maybe you invested in EGL at maybe about 3 cedis or 2 cedis per share some years back, and it hit about 5 Ghana cedis and you sold off, you would have made some gains. But now EGL is 4 cedis, 49 pesos. So probably some investors would not be very excited because they were expecting it to continue to show up in value on the stock market. But that's what is happening, and that's the expectation that we're looking at in general. So
what's been happening today?
Well, today we saw 3 equities lose on their share prices. Access Bank lost 60 pesos. That was the highest absolute loser on the exchange. And then we had EcoBank, Ghana, and Gold going down by a peso each. Access Bank closed at 3 cedis, 40 pesos per share. And then EcoBank 4 cedis, 49 pesos, and Gold 2 cedis, 32 pesos per share. And if you look at Gold is actually, as of Friday, was the second highest returning equity on the stock market with year-to-date returns of 111.82%. The highest now is BOPP, Benzo Oil Palm Plantation, returning 172.12% to investors. EGL, though it's lost some pesos last week, it lost 50 pesos last week, is returning 87.50% to investors from beginning of the year till now. HFC, within the shortest possible time, has been able to make some gains, and we've seen some positive results. We discussed that the last time, is returning 82.67%, and then FML, Fan Milk, is returning 78.64%. ETI and Standard Chartered Bank preference shares returning 60% each to investors on the stock market. So these are the equities that's actually returning 60% and above to investors on the stock market. That's
so on the whole, how do we expect the week to look like? Because analysts are projecting a lively market activity. Now, as you've been saying, things are not looking so good.
Well, expectation could be positive, but we should expect the other side as well. Because if you look at what is really happening on the market, well, shares are trading. We see some volumes going on in GCB, ETI, and all that. But when you look at the average returns on the stock market, there's a possibility that it could drop as we saw last week.
Okay, so let's quickly talk about the policy rate and whatever impact it can have on the stock markets, because we've seen the central bank hold the rate at 21%. What does this mean for
Well, there's this relationship between interest rates and then the stock market. There's an inverse relationship. and when interest rates are going down, we see that the stock market or the equity market actually does well to some extent. It's not 100%, let's say, stagnant, as in that is what always happens, yes, but that is to some extent, that's what we have, that inverse relationship. And if the policy rate has been maintained, we wouldn't, it's not going to have that very significant impact, because it's still going to be the same thing that we're going to see in the market. It hasn't changed, so it wouldn't bring significant changes on the stock market.
All right, thanks very much, Bertha, to bringing us up to speed. I wanted to ask you about the city, because a long time we heard about its performance as we are heading to the end of the third quarter of the year.
We'll bring you detailed analysis of how it's performed in this quarter of the year.
Okay, so can you tell us how the city fared generally today, just before we go?
Well, today we can say we haven't seen a significant depreciations when it comes to the performance of the city against major trading partners on the interbank market. It's still very, like, the changes are very marginal. Is not very, very significant, but we'll bring you up to date of what's happening on the stock market.
Right.
So as you can see there, the dollar, the change wasn't that significant. It's actually appreciated by 0.0024 Ghana cedis, which is not very, very significant. If you look at the depreciations that we are seeing, 0.01, it's not very significant, as I said.
All right. Yeah. Thanks very much, Bertha Atwiga, bringing us up to speed on the stock market and also on the performance of the currency there. Thanks. And that'll be it for Business Live. Thanks for watching. We are back same time tomorrow. My name is Darryl Kwao.